The movie opens with Danish soldiers patrolling Helmand province. A tragedy strikes as one of the soldiers, Andres, steps on a bomb and dies from horrific injuries. His left leg has completely fallen off, struck by the explosion. His fellow soldiers rush to keep him alive while keeping his pulse checked constantly. Unfortunately, they were unable to save his life, and his commander, Klaus, back at base camp, can do little to help. He is horrified to lose his men and can only arrange a short meeting to address the incident. However, another commander was insistent that the death of the young soldier could not be taken seriously. The man then busts out of the room inappropriately, and Klaus ends the meeting shortly. He later briefs the soldiers personally. He reminds them they are here to protect and secure the civil population so they can have a decent life and rebuild their lands. It is now revealed that they are on Afghan land that is currently occupied by the terrorist group of Taliban. Elsewhere, back at his home, Claude's wife, Maria, is present with their 3 children, trying to hold everyday life together with a husband at war and 3 children missing their father. The mid-child, Julies, has trouble at school fighting with another boy, and the girls always fight at home. She tries to manage them while keeping the hopes and spirit of the family. She tells them their dad will call after dinner, but Klaus only calls late in the night after the kids go to bed. As a result, he is unable to talk to the kids, but he informs his wife about the incident on patrol. But the little boy, Elliot, woke up and they couldn't hold the conversation. He hangs up the phone as she goes back to check on the boy. Another day shines back in Afghanistan, where Klaus wakes up to be confronted by another soldier named Lasse. He was present back at the site where he saw his friend explode and lose his life. He has been traumatized since the day, and now he wishes Klaus would send him back home for rest. However, Klaus sadly breaks it for him. He had already signed up for such matters when he became a soldier. He can only propose to give him assignments that can be done inside the camp. That way, he can have time to process what he saw outside of the gates. Lasse is disappointed, but Klaus offers him a cigarette to calm him down and a favor to have him call his family. Lasse calls his little sister quickly as Klaus leaves, and it comforts him. On another patrol on another day, the Danish soldiers came across a local man. An immediate chaos and pointing guns occur as they consider him one of the terrorists. They bombarded him in no time, and the man continued to plead for his life. He was speaking in the local language, so they were unable to understand. A translating soldier was quickly called, and it turns out the man was just a civilian who was pleading for the soldiers to help him save his daughter's life. The daughter's hand had been burned in an accident, and he was just seeking help. They head inside the man's house to see the child. Her hand was burned, and she was agonizing in pain. They called their medic to help the family out, and the man thanked them. Klaus and the other soldiers then went outside to see around, and they came across the local kids who were playing with a kite. At the campsite, Klaus uses his rest time to call back home. Maria picks up, and he gets the chance to speak to the kids. Meanwhile, his friend Najib was around, and he also said hello to the kids. Everybody is missing home, but Najib jokes around with the kids to make things easier. Despite her efforts, Maria is having a hard time keeping up with her daily activities. This time, Julian refuses to leave the car, and she loses her temper when she forcefully drags him to the house. Back in the war zone, Klaus is now dealing with a hidden, huge artillery grenade. It's the same case as Andre's, but this time the crew noticed it before anybody got hurt. However, the soldiers don't leave easily. There is another Taliban target around the place that they must take down. All the Danish soldiers are in their places, waiting to have a clear shot. When they do, Klaus gives the final order, and the men successfully take the Taliban down. Meanwhile, Maria connected with her distant child, Julie. She came to realize that Julius just misses his dad and only thinks about him constantly. Later, she is rushed to the hospital because Elliot has accidentally swallowed a lot of paracetamol. The doctor managed to detox Elliot's body of the toxicity, but Maria is left in terror at what Klaus's absence is doing to her. She silently hurts alone, and at night, she takes the kids back home. In the meantime, Klaus tries to call her from the camp, which only leaves him unanswered. Later that day, the former civilian whom his daughter burned came into the camp looking for Klaus. Unfortunately, the real terrorist Taliban is threatening to kill his family because he accepted the Danish soldiers' help that day. Klaus explains to him, with the help of a female translator, that he must go back with his family in order for them to be strategically rescued. He offers the man a cigarette to keep his temper down, and he shortly leaves to go back. Klaus still feels bad, but he has decided. After a short and brief meeting with his fellow soldiers, the Danish went outside to the warfield. All are now in their marks, including Klaus. There is an indication that the Taliban are around, but for now they haven't opened fire yet. When they slowly made their entrance to the men's house, they sadly found him dead, killed by the Talibans. His kids are also murdered. Klaus goes out and checks on his soldiers, but suddenly the Taliban strike a bomb a few miles away. The Danish soldiers are now in shock, and soon they will start opening fire on the enemy side. Lasse is wounded in the process, and Klaus and the others drag him to safety, but he is badly hurt. Klaus is now terrified to see his team separated and crushed. He asks asked the sniper to report the clear location of the enemy, but that is also unclear. When everything seems helpless, Commander Klaus takes the decision to bomb the compound. His main focus is to keep Lasse alive until he gets medicated. Without any approval of who is inside or what, Klaus's command is verified by exploding the entire place. Shortly thereafter, helicopter aid was sent to them, and they were able to escort Lasse alive. But despite the success, Klaus sits in contemplation, knowing that his actions were biased against the possibility of civilians living in the compound. He just needed a cover to rescue Lasse's life. At the campsite, sometime later, the team catches up with Lasse, who is now recovering from his injuries. He tells them he is doing okay, but due to his throat being cut, he is unable to speak through his voice. They all wished for him to get better, and Klaus seems to be doing okay for now. At home, Maria is coping with the 3 chaotic kids. She is meeting with her friend, who supports her to keep up, and she tells her she is doing her best. However, back at the camp, Klaus is summoned by his superior commanders. They say they have to interview him regarding some civilian casualties, and although he is not charged, they have given him the right to remain silent. After the interview began, he was asked several questions, such as about being in the war zone that day. It's also verified that he gave the final orders to bomb the compound regardless of the enemy's presence. One thing leads to another, and for the next couple of days, Klaus is disgraced by being charged with bombing a civilian target, which results in the deaths of 11 innocent people. He is soon suspended indefinitely and sent home to follow his trial. Maria and the kids welcome him at the airport, and for the dad, he just focuses on his wife and kids. He plays with them at night but hasn't said anything yet. It is when every kid is asleep that he will tell Maria the real deal behind his return. He is disappointed, as much as she was relieved by his arrival. The next day, the couple visited a lawyer to consult with. The lawyer received the case files, and he informs the clients that there is camera footage from the helmet camera that shows Klaus ordering the attack on the civilian compound. He is also guilty of deciding on such alternatives without seeing the enemy accurately. He will be changed within a minimum of 4 years if he is found guilty. This frightens Maria, but she doesn't say anything until they get in the car. She fears the consequences, but Klaus is firm. He surely should pay for his deeds. She insists he is a father and a husband, but this only leads to more arguments. For the next couple of days before trial day, Klaus spends his day contemplating what will happen. On the day, he entered the courtroom with his lawyer, and the prosecution began. His fellow soldiers are also there to witness the events, and they will also be giving their words later on in the process. The prosecutor is a woman from the Military Persecution Service, and the defendant is clearly Klaus's lawyer. The woman starts by showing the footage and some pictures taken. The visual is very explicit, and we see numerous people terribly laying dead. Everyone in the room feels bad, even Klaus, but the woman doesn't stop there. She repeatedly asks him where and when he saw the enemy in the compound. He initially explains what the accident was like for Lasse and how the circumstances obligated him to take cover, but he lies to her about the sightings of the enemy in the compound. The smart prosecutor surely exposes voice recordings and evidence that is against his words, so he is left disgraced. The trial ends for the day, and we are shown Klaus spending time with Julie and the other two. He is still feeling bad and low, not to mention how much Maria hates him now. At the next trial, Klaus' colleagues are approached to witness the event. Najib was also present to give his word, and the word turned out to be very moving and helpful in Klaus's case. He basically mentions how nobody is in charge of judging the actions of the commanders in charge of order, and Klaus is the most capable of the ones he has known so far. The trial ends for the day, and we see Klaus and Maria back at home. This time, Klaus breaks down in tears, as his life is now miserable and unpreparable. Maria hugs him like a baby and listens to his agony. After all, where do husbands go other than the arms of their guardians? The next trial day arrives, and another soldier takes the seat to witness. He was the same radio operating soldier who was arguing with Klaus in the war zone. He was there when Klaus gave the orders to strike, so he seems to be the guy who could condemn or rescue Klaus. Unexpectedly, Klaus's former radio operator testifies that he identified muzzle flashes in the compound, giving Klaus a plausible reason to call the airstrike. Though this evidence is dubious, it is enough to convince the judge and subcommittee that Klaus had legitimate personal identification with the enemy. After that, both parties present their concluding pleas to the jury, and the trial is adjourned to another final day. Until that day arrives, Klaus spends pure time with his family by going to the beach and expressing his love for Maria, no matter how the sentence turns out. On the day, Klaus and every colleague of his looked very stressed out. They fear and really respect their boss, and we see that through each witnessing session. The sentence then began, and And finally, luck is on the side of Klaus. He is finally found not guilty. He sighs in relief, and shortly he embraces his beloved wife happily. His fellow soldiers leave the courtroom happily, and shortly we are shown Klaus's house at night. He is now a happy man with his family. The film comes to a close as we see Klaus at night, tucking his young son into bed. He notices how his son's feet resemble those of the murdered little girl in Helmand. He sits alone outside, looking at the night sky, contemplating the outcomes of life's choices. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our video. Watch the next recaps on the screen and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.